So very good evening everyone. So you all knew that we have been discussing 2025 mains question and answers, and you all knew that in previous classes we have discussed some important questions that were asked in Gender Studies paper 1. So by discussing and analyzing these question papers, you would know the basic themes and the structure of the answers, right? So it actually provides you important insights about answer writing. So how we can write the answers and how effectively we can write the answers, and what are the important components that have to be included in the answer writing. So everything you get to know from this analysis. Now another question that we are going to discuss today is the ethos of civil services in India stand for the combination of professionalism with the nationalistic consciousness. Now understand, this is very rare that such type of questions are being asked in Gender Studies paper 1. Maybe such questions are asked in, you might have seen such questions in ethics paper or Gender Studies paper 2, right? So therefore there has been changing pattern, right? So UPSC can ask these type of questions in Gender Studies paper 1 also, right? So the ethos of civil service. So there are certain ethos. Now how the ethos of civil services in India stand for the combination of professionalism with the nationalistic consciousness. So you have to elucidate this with examples. So it is very important that you have to mention as many examples as possible in questions like this, right? So if you look at the model framework for this particular type of a question, so what should be the introduction in this question? Now if you talk about the introduction, so just briefly introduce how the ethos of Indian civil service. So those ethos actually blend the civil service professionalism with the nationalistic consciousness. So you have to briefly mention this aspect. Then you, in the body part of the answer, so you need to talk about how professionalism ensures impartiality. Now impartiality essentially means that you're not biased towards a particular political party. You're not biased towards a particular politician. So you are working impartially following the constitutional morality, the existing laws and rules. So which is known as impartial. A civil servant being impartial is very important. So after that we need to talk about the efficiency or efficacy of the civil servants. Now for any civil servant, efficiency is very important. How efficiently you are working. For example, you're given a project, you are a head of the project. How efficiently you are executing the project. And the accountability is also very important because you are in a public domain. So in a public domain, you should be answerable and accountable to the public, right? So these are some important civil services values in India. However, so these are the values which are associated with the professionalism of civil servants, right? The values like impartiality, accountability, efficiency, transparency. So they are associated with the professionalism of a civil servant. However, the nationalism, right? So the nationalism inspires unity, welfare orientation and the constitutional loyalty. Okay, so therefore civil servants like T.N. Seshan and E. Sridharan and even Armstrong Palme, so they actually exemplify this strategy, right? So in the conclusion, what you should write. So conclusion, so together they sustain democracy, nation building and inclusive governance. So you have to give, a positive way, right? So you need to write a positive conclusion so that it will be as impactful as possible, right? So that is the essence. Now let's understand the introduction of it. Introduction is very important for any question. So the examiner, once he looks at the introduction, so he get to know so what should be the content in the body part of the answer. So you no need to write this lengthy introduction, right? So just mention a specific points, important points in the introduction itself. Now we have discussed about the professional aspect, the professional values of civil services and the nationalistic consciousness as well. However, so it is being said that the ethos of civil services in India, so it is rooted in vision of building a modern democratic state, right? So don't you think India is a modern democratic state, right? So therefore it is being said that the ethos of civil services in India is rooted in the vision of building a modern democratic state and at the same time safeguarding the national interests, right? So there is a need to safeguard the national interests. So what should be the national interests? So what are the national interests? For example, alleviation of poverty, right? And achieving the goal of $5 trillion economy or becoming the third largest economy. So don't you think all of them are the national interests, right? So therefore it is a careful synthesis of building a modern democratic state while safeguarding the national interests. However, the civil servants are expected to embody professional competence. So the professional competence involves efficiency, impartiality, plus integrity and accountability. So these are the essential values which actually decides the professional efficiency or professional competence of a civil servant. However, if we talk about the nationalistic consciousness, so what exactly is this nationalistic consciousness? So commitment to unity, we are one. So welfare of the people. For example, India is a country with around 21% of its population living below poverty line, right? So in this context, ensuring the welfare of the people, making the developmental schemes or the other welfare schemes reach to the poorest of the poor, and ensuring social justice. So these are the components of the nationalistic consciousness. So therefore the civil services is a combination of professional competence along with the nationalistic consciousness, right? So therefore this is a unique synergy or a unique blend, right? So this unique blend ensures that the existing administration is not only technically sound but also socially responsive. In the sense it will be empathetic and also compassionate administration. So you can go through all the foundational values of civil services, but they're not that important for this particular paper. But foundational values of civil services are very, very important for general studies paper 4. Ethics paper, the foundational values are very important. You can expect good number of questions from this foundational values for civil services. And even if you write answers in ethics, these foundational values in civil services, they'll be very helpful for you. For example, the foundational values for civil services, they help respect for the rule of law, courage of conviction, accountability, tolerance, transparency, ethical leadership, integrity, empathy, compassion. So these are all the foundational values for the civil services or for any civil servant, right? So let's understand this, right? So as we have discussed just now, civil services foundational values are a blend or a combination of the professional competency as well as the national consciousness or nationalistic consciousness, right? So it is a blend of both. So let's understand the professionalism in the civil services. Now, if we talk about the professionalism in civil services, we need to talk about the certain values. So what are those values which actually reflect the professional conduct of civil services or civil servants? For example, you're being impartial. Now, impartial in the sense that you're not biased, right? So you are solely guided by the constitutional values, constitutional morality, the existing rules and laws. You're not impartial to anybody. However, as a civil servant, you are expected to a certain degree, you should be impartial towards the poor. And integrity. So integrity is another very important foundational value in civil services. So when it is said that you are an officer of integrity, That essentially means that whatever you are doing, so you are consistent with your values. You have the value system, and you are, whatever you are doing which is consistent with your value system, your thoughts, what you are doing, what you are thinking, what you are speaking, so everything is in consistency, is in sync, so which is integrity. And integrity is also very important for any civil servant. And efficiency, as I've already told you, how efficiency is very important. So if you are an efficient officer, you will be rewarded, you will be recognized by the people. And accountability in public service is also very important, because if there's no accountability, then that will result in corruption, misuse of your authority, misuse of the funds. So accountability, efficiency, integrity and impartiality, all these are foundational values which are very important in the civil services. So let's understand the other aspects which are associated with the professionalism in civil services. So firstly, we have to talk about the impartial administration. Now when I say impartial administration, so I've already told you about this, right? So it is just ensuring rule of law. What does rule of law actually means? That every country, every society has the law, and you have to follow the law. You have to follow the constitution. You have to follow the existing rules, right? So you have to ensure the rule of law without fear or favor, right? So remember that when you are writing these points, it is always advised and suggested that you mention the examples also, right? So examples can make your answer more and more impactful and effective. For example, the Election Commission of India, right? So the officers from the Election Commission of India, they conduct elections in a free and fair manner. So don't you think that this is an impartial way of conducting elections, right? So Election Commission of India, while conducting elections, it is not under the government control, right? So it is a neutral, constitutional and independent body, and it is successful in conducting free and fair elections in India, right? So therefore Election Commission of India is an epitome of impartial administration. Then we need to talk about the policy implementation aspect as well, because policy implementation is also another very important domain which is under the control of the civil servants, right? So they play a very important role in policy formulation and policy implementation as well. For example, the all IAS, IPS, IFS, so these officers, they apply their specialized knowledge in sectors like economy, policing and the diplomacy, and they also play a very important role in the policy formulation, not just policy implementation but policy formulation also. They play a very important role. Now institutional neutrality. Now when I say institutional neutrality, that essentially means that they uphold the existing constitutional provisions, the constitutional morality above the partisan politics. So they don't favor any political party or any candidate from a particular political party. So they work in a neutral and independent manner. This is how, so we can say that there's a professionalism in civil services. Now what are the examples of professionalism in civil services? Let's understand the examples as well. So Lal Bahadur Shastri, so he was a civil servant before becoming the Prime Minister, right? So in fact he emphasized the administrative integrity, right? So administrative integrity essentially means that you have certain rules, you have certain values, and you have to follow those rules and values. You should not be impartial, right? So therefore Lal Bahadur Shastri clearly emphasized on the administrative integrity, and he emphasized on the neutrality on the part of the civil servants, because civil servants are known as the permanent executives. And another best example was T.N. Seshan. So T.N. Seshan was the former election commissioner of India, chief election commissioner of India, and in fact when he was the chief election commissioner, he brought in several reforms in the functioning of the election commission, and he strengthened the professionalism, he strengthened the character of the Election Commission of India, and he was also brought certain reforms in the election management as well, and that helped in conducting free and fair elections. And in fact, E. Sridharan, so E. Sridharan is known as the Metro Man of India, right? Because he was the planner and architect of the Delhi Metro, which is now successfully running. So E. Sridharan upheld the efficiency and transparency in the infrastructure building. Right, so these are the examples of professionalism in civil services. Next, we need to talk about the nationalistic consciousness in civil services, and how this nationalistic consciousness is also a guiding force, a factor for motivating and inspiring the civil servants. So let's understand about this aspect as well. Now, one thing that we should understand is that civil servants are known as the generalists. They're not experts, right? So even though some civil servants are also the technocrats because they have the domain expertise, so they're not just mere technocrats, but they are also considered as trustees of the nation's democratic and developmental goals, right? So you have certain democratic and developmental goals, and it is very important as a civil servant to implement those democratic and developmental goals, achieve those goals. Now when I say the democratic goals, now one democratic goal is that everyone should have the right to vote, and in fact it is a democratic goal, and we already achieved that because the Constitution of India has itself provided universal adult suffrage. So everyone who is above 18 years of age would be given a right to vote, right? So there are certain developmental goals as well, right? So we want to become a third largest economy, we wanted to become fifth $5 trillion economy. So these are the developmental goals, and we also wanted to become a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. So this is also a developmental goal. So therefore civil servants actually play a very important role, and they are even called as trustees in this process of achieving and realizing these goals, right? So in commitment to unity and integrity, IPS and defense linked bureaucrats, so they ensure internal security and the counter insurgency, right? So public welfare orientation, so if we talk about the public welfare orientation, for example, implementation of the poverty alleviation programs. Remember, as I've already told you, that as per 2011 census, so we have 21% of the people who are living in the below poverty line, right? So in fact there are number of programs that are already being launched. For example, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. Now this program aimed at alleviating the rural poverty, and ensuring the livelihood security for the rural masses. So with this objective, this scheme has been launched with this objective, right? So therefore they have the public welfare orientation as a civil servants, and they also have the commitment to unity and integrity of the nation. And in fact, if we look at the IFS officers, so they actually build India's image globally, right? So they build India's image globally, they further the soft power, right? So they actually project India's national interests and overall interests abroad. Now what are the best examples which reflect the nationalistic consciousness in civil services or civil servants? So the examples would be K. Subramaniam, right? So he was also a civil servant, and in fact he played an instrumental role to build India's national security framework, right? And IAS Armstrong Palme, so this is one of the very best example, very often used example in ethics paper. And Armstrong Palme is known as the miracle man because he built roads in Manipur using community support, fostering unity. So despite lack of funds, with the help of community support, he built the road. He provided access to the markets for the local people. Right? So civil servants' work during COVID-19 pandemic was also commendable job that they have done. So they ensured vaccine rollout and relief measures with patriotic zeal. So you already have seen how civil servants were working, right? So during COVID-19 pandemic, how they worked as well. Now let's understand how the two ethos would actually work together. Now professionalism ensures efficiency and fairness into the civil services, and nationalism provides moral direction and purpose. Right? So if we talk about the civil services in modern India, so which is a blend of professionalism and the nationalism, because professionalism ensures efficiency and fairness, and nationalism provides moral direction and purpose for the civil servants. Now if these two ethos work together, they will help in the disaster management. Right? So India is a country which is vulnerable to number of disasters. For example, if you look at the Himalayan belt, so which is vulnerable to earthquakes, and the coastal areas are vulnerable to cyclones and tsunamis, and in fact landslides across the Western Ghats and the Himalayan region, glacial lake outburst floods and cloud bursts. So these are all the major disasters, and India is vulnerable to all those disasters. So civil servants can actually play a very important and a very prominent role during disaster management, providing relief material, reducing the impact, mitigating any such disasters through careful planning. Right? So civil servants combine the technical skills with the empathy for the victims, because so once you are struck in a disaster, so you have to be shifted to the relief camps, and in those relief camps you will be provided all necessary things. Secondly, Digital India and Aadhaar. So with this professional IT expertise plus national mission of inclusion. Next, we need to talk about the Swachh Bharat mission. So if we talk about the Swachh Bharat mission, so the civil servants actually play a very important role in the implementation of the Swachh Bharat mission as well, because through the patriotic appeal for cleanliness, they are trying to bring the attitudinal changes. Right? So they are trying to bring the behavioral changes among the people, and the professional project execution as well. Right? So through the professional values and the national consciousness, so they are implementing several programs successfully. Right? So even before 1947 also, Indian ICS officers like VP Menon, so they negotiated integration with the princely states with the professional acumen and the nationalistic spirit as well. So therefore there are number of civil servants who have done exceptionally commendably good work. Right? So we need to appreciate them. We need to appreciate those civil servants. Right? So what you should write in the conclusion of this answer, right? So in the conclusion you have to appreciate the commendable work that they have done so far. Right? So in fact, the ethos or the essence of Indian civil services, so it actually lies in a careful blend or harmonizing the professional competence of the civil servants with the nationalistic consciousness. Right? So this blend or synergy or the balance, so this is very important component, and this ensures that governance is not only technically sound and effective, but it also deeply aligned with the aspirations of the entire nation. Right? So therefore we already knew that the civil services are called as the steel frame of India. Right? So when I say steel frame of India, they uphold democracy, they work for the unity of the nation and the collective progress of the entire country. right? So this is how you have to write the conclusion, and make sure this conclusion is positive in nature, it is optimistic in nature, right? I hope you have understood this question. And the next important question, it is about the globalization. So let's understand this question as well. The question is, do you think that globalization results in only an aggressive consumer culture? Justify your answer. You have to justify your answer, right? So if we talk about the globalization, it is very simple. First of all, you need to understand what exactly is globalization, right? So there are some standard definitions of globalization. So when I say globalization, it is a global village. Global village. And another definition is, it is a borderless world. It is a borderless world. So there are no borders to this world if we describe globalization, or it is also called as a global village. Now this question asks us that this globalization results in only aggressive consumer culture or anything else. Now if you take a stand that it only leads to aggressive consumer culture, you have to argue strongly why. And if you take a stand against this, you have to mention points with the examples. So what should be the model framework? So let's understand the model framework for this question. So firstly, in the introduction, you have to define what exactly globalization, and then you need to mention that while it does promote consumer culture, it also brings other significant changes across society, economy and culture, right? So since it is a 150 word answer, what you have to do, you just define globalization in the introduction, and in the body part of the answer, so you have to mention how it leads to the aggressive consumer culture. For example, there are a number of global brands, and those global brands, through advertisements, they influence the lifestyle of the people and they promote the materialistic tendencies among the people. So for example, the fast fashion networks, global food chains, McDonald's, Zara, so everything, right? So because internet is easily accessible for all of us, the advertisements also easily reaching to us, and they are also influencing our lifestyle, our fashion style, our food sense, everything. And then you have to mention some positive impacts of the globalization and negative impacts of the globalization with appropriate examples, and then you have to conclude this answer, right? So in conclusion, you can mention that the globalization has both positive sides and negative sides, but the success of globalization would be resulting only through the balanced globalization and humane globalization, right? So you have to stress on humane globalization and the balanced globalization. So you have to emphasize on this, you have to stress on this, right? So I hope you have understood this. Now let's understand the definition of the globalization, right? So if we talk about the definition of globalization, as I've already told you, so those are the two ways to describe globalization. But another important definition that you have to write in your answer when you get a question about the globalization. So also understand, in gender studies paper 1, globalization is a very, very important topic. So it is very often repeated topic. A number of times the questions on globalization are repeated. So globalization essentially means, so this is increasing interaction, increasing integration among the people. Not just people, there are companies, governments across the world. So this is the simple definition of globalization, right? So increasing interaction and increasing integration among the governments, people and companies is known as globalization. Now the effect of the globalization were felt in India after the LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization and globalization, right? So in fact, what are the key defining characteristics of globalization? So the characteristics are international trade, investment, technology and the movement of the people and information across the borders, right? So After the LPG reforms in India, you have seen increasing international trade for India with other countries, increasing foreign direct investment, increasing technology transfer, and movement of people and information across the borders as well. Right? So let's understand, is globalization only about aggressive consumer culture? Right, this is the question. So is it only about the aggressive consumer culture? So it is true that globalization has led to aggressive consumer culture, but this is not completely true. Right? So this is universally agreed, accepted fact about the globalization. Right? So it is not just about the complete consumerism. Right? So in fact, after globalization, what happened was there was an aggressive consumer culture. Right? So what does aggressive consumer culture actually means? That there is increased levels of consumerism of the products all across the world. Now this aggressive consumer culture has not only the result of globalization, but it affects the economy, culture, education, technology, and labor markets all across the world. Right? So in fact, if you can look at the globalization and aggressive consumer culture, the examples like McDonaldization or McDonald's, Zara, and Apple, so they actually dominate the markets all across the world because of the globalization. And in fact, these companies with new products and new features, they encourage people to buy more and desire the latest trends and latest brands. So even if people don't need them, because of a new brand, a new trend, or new feature, people would buy them. So this is the aggressive consumerism. Even if you don't want something, you are buying it. And this has been promoted by the globalization. So what are the impacts of globalization? So it promotes materialism, it creates buy more mindset, and it also increases pressure on people to follow the global trends. Right? So these are the examples. So let's understand the advantages of globalization, because globalization has certain advantages as well. So we should also look at those advantages. Now because of the globalization, there has been access to the global markets. Now imagine an MSME in India. So this MSME in India able to access US and European markets. US and Europe markets. So therefore what happened is the competitiveness of the goods manufactured by these MSMEs increasing because of the global markets access. Right? So an example has also been given. An Indian textile company can sell products in Europe or US using online platforms like Amazon or Alibaba. So this is the first advantage of the globalization. So the next advantage of the globalization is cultural exchange. Now in fact, India is one of the first countries which exports soft power to other countries. So this is possible because of the globalization. Right? So globalization has led to the movement of people. You agree with that? So it led to the movement of people, and movement of people. So mostly Indians are settled in Middle East, they settled in US, and they settled in countries like Europe, Australia. So when they migrated to these countries, they also practice their own culture in those respective countries. Right? So therefore it is the soft power. It is helping us further spreading our soft power to other countries. For example, people across the world enjoy K-pop from Korea, sushi from Japan, Hollywood movies. Right? So this actually increases the mutual understanding and appreciation of different cultures all across the world. For example, yoga. So yoga is part of Indian tradition. Now the entire world has been embracing yoga. Next, we need to talk about the technology and knowledge transfer. The best example would be the COVID-19 vaccines. So India, through the vaccine Maitri program, India through the Vaccine Maitri program has provided vaccines to the developing countries in the global south, because those countries don't have the capabilities to manufacture the vaccines, right? So India, in order to increase its global image, and India as a responsible nation, has provided vaccines to entire world, mostly the developing world, through its Vaccine Maitri program. So therefore it also results in technology and knowledge transfer to the other countries as well. And in fact, globalization has also led to the employment opportunities, because based on globalization and the ideas of globalization, several companies have benefited, and they are also giving gainful employment opportunities for the local people all across the world. For example, Apple, a top mobile manufacturing brand, and this, if it establishes an assembling unit in India, it provides employment opportunities for the local youth, and Apple becomes a top global brand because of the globalization, right? So it is a well-known fact. Now, globalization also comes with certain disadvantages, so let's understand those disadvantages as well. However, it is believed that globalization leads to the cultural hegemonization rather than each community, each society following their own culture, because it is generally believed that through globalization, the Western powers have been imposing their own cultures on us, which is also called as the westernization. So imposing Western cultures on the South Asian cultures or Southeast Asian cultures. So this has been possible through the globalization. For example, traditional clothing in many countries is being replaced with the Western fashion and the local languages. Now, in fact, the languages are also disappearing fast, right? So there are a number of languages which have been disappearing, or they have been losing their importance, right? So globalization also have the cultural homogenization fears with it. So secondly, we need to talk about the exploitation of labor as well, because the fast fashion brands and some other mobile manufacturing companies, they produce clothes in countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam. So they also provide poor working conditions for the labor, and they also provide the lower wages for the workers. Now this very often leads to the exploitation of the labor. And apart from that, we should also talk about the environmental degradation. So the example would be the global supply chains increase pollution from shipping and manufacturing, like the plastic waste from international packaging or the carbon emissions from the factories as well. So these are some best examples of the environmental degradation. So ultimately, in the conclusion of the answer, what you have to write, right? So we all knew that the globalization has led to the aggressive consumer culture, but it has not only led to the aggressive consumer culture, right? So it has several benefits, it has several advantages and disadvantages as well. However, the impact of the globalization, or the best potential of the globalization, can be realized based on how it has been managed. For example, Prime Minister Narendra Modi talked about humane globalization, takes into account the needs of the most marginalized and disadvantaged sections of the society, which is called as humane globalization. And another aspect is the balanced globalization, ethical globalization. So if the globalization is humane, balanced and ethical, then the potential of the globalization in alleviation of poverty, achieving tremendous amount of growth and development even to the poor societies, can be achieved and realized, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much.